Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are here today on January 8th with our first Maintainers Lightning Talks. My name is Sam Bennett. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an American based in Amsterdam. And I'm in the midst of getting a PhD at the Technology University of Eindhoven, where I'm studying community-led design work through the lens of repair. I also run a studio called Repair Shop, where I teach people different textile repair techniques. And I run an Apple a Day, a global cohort of 60 menders who come together to talk about care as we age. And I'm also one of 5 of the maintainers steering committee. And my role is governance co-chair, where I essentially organize our monthly meetings with my other co-chair, Hamani. And just to give you a little bit of a background of who the maintainers are, we're a global research and practice network that is focused on advancing maintenance, repair, and care. And we convene interdisciplinary change makers, researchers, practitioners, and everyday people who center maintenance, repair, and care in the myriad forms of labor, expertise, and infrastructure that sustain our human-built world. And one important thing to note is we have moved into a community-led network. And so the 5 steering committee members have been organizing different events, creating newsletters, and keeping the maintainers running. And we are using this day to come together and get to know you all who have come. And we decided to do lightning talks to hear about the variety of maintenance that is happening around the world. And so we're really excited to have 4 lightning talks featuring Deborah Streahle, Regina Carra, Miriam Devlin, and Betty Rexrode. And before I forget, I need to put captions on. So I totally forgot about that. And
They're on. They're enabled.
you are okay, cool. Thank you. Sorry, I just forgot. So we have 4 amazing people joining us today. And this is the first time we're doing this, and we hope to have more of these talks in the future. At the end of our time together this hour, I'll put a link in the chat where if you're interested in sharing your work, you can. Each presenter will have 5 minutes to share a bit about their practice and research, and they will present back to back with introductions from our other members of the Maintainers Steering Committee. And that we ask that you add your comments and questions to the chat. And at the end of the 4 presentations, we will have time to discuss more deeply as a group. Um, so with that, I will pass it on to Hamani to introduce the first presenter.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Sam, for introducing us all today. My name is Himani. I am co-chair with Sam here on the maintainers. As a professional, I'm a mental health professional based in Delhi, India, and my work goes into practice as a therapist, researcher, facilitator, as well as designer of different well-being and learning initiatives. I run a small sharing circle here in Delhi, in Noida specifically, and that focuses on transitions in different stages of adulthood and work across themes of well-being and taking care of relational self-care. So that's me. Now I'm going to introduce Deborah. Deborah is a lecturer, and today she's going to talk about themes about how we can make sure that we are taking care of the waste that is being created in the medical field, especially, and her expertise in the area of what does medical waste mean and how do we imagine a world where it's treated better. On to you, Deborah.
Thank you for that introduction from Sam and from Himani. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Oops. Zoom windows in my way. Let me know if, hopefully, no, I don't see anything. Okay. Can you see that okay? No?
I think on my end it looks cropped, but maybe that's just me.
Hmm. Let's see if
It
I can
looks
fix it.
cropped. Um, Looks good now.
Try one more time here.
Is it because of the spotlight, Sam?
It shouldn't be.
Okay.
Well, we did try this just 5 minutes ago and it was working.
It's okay, take
I
your time.
apologize for the wait.
No need to.
It's very slow.
Is the slideshow perhaps playing in another window that you're not sharing?
I don't see that. There's only the one window, it looks like. Let me stop sharing, then I'll just try all over again. Unless you want to just
Or
let
I can
someone
try to, I
else.
can share, Deborah, if you'd rather, what would you prefer?
That's fine with me if you want to do that.
Okay, let me just grab it.
It says I'm offline. Well, that's not true.
Okay. Okay, let me share. And then let me go full screen. Can you all see this? Or no, it says stop sharing. Okay, hold on. Okay, can you see this?
Yes, I can see that. Great.
Okay, just let me know when to click through.
Okay, well, too. Let's see here. I got my other notes since this one is not loading at all anymore. All right, well, let me just jump right in here now since we're a little behind. Okay, so I'm starting a new, so I'm Deborah Streahle, as I was introduced, and I am a historian of medicine. I'm starting a brand new research project about the infrastructures of medical waste. And this follows my first book project, which addresses death care activism in the 1960s in the United States, which is where I am based. So I'm used to thinking about care work and maintenance in spheres that some people, at least, I think, avoid or think of behind the scenes. And I think that these behind the scenes topics are important because they make clear cultural values. And they also clarify where the boundaries of care are. So in this case, I'm interested in medical care. So are environmentally healthy waste management practices part of good medicine? Do medical providers have an ethical imperative to care about the life cycle of medical products? And so I'm a historian, so a key question for me is how has medical waste management changed over time? Why and what are the social impacts of those changes? You can change to the next slide, please. So for this project, I'm looking specifically at Yale New Haven Hospital in New Haven, Connecticut. The hospital was founded in 1826 and has changed a lot, but it remains a large teaching hospital and one of the largest hospitals in the US. One of the lines of my inquiry here is into the drivers of change in medical waste management. So are changes related to costs, to labor concerns, public health priorities? I'll throw out a few examples from the past 40 years. So in the late 1980s, several miles of medical waste sludge, including syringes, washed up along the east coast of the US. This led to the Medical Waste Tracking Act in 1989, which regulated medical waste, but This expired in 1991, and it's complicated, so I won't get into it. But now medical waste is primarily regulated by state environmental and health departments. So that's kind of a public health and environmentally health related driver of change. When we think about cost, so in the 2010s, Yale New Haven focused on getting staff to properly separate different kinds of waste, especially pharmaceutical waste, to reduce the cost of hazardous waste disposal. So for ease, hospitals would just classify a lot of things as hazardous, which incurred enormous costs. In reality, most medical waste, maybe like 80-ish% in the US at least, isn't hazardous. So training people and even hiring people to educate staff about waste segregation pays off quickly. And then I think more recently, we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which had a very visible increase in the use of disposable personal protective equipment and has started to raise concerns about this issue on a broader scale. You can go to the next slide, please. So this is a map centered on Yale Medical Campus, which includes the hospital. It shows that the surrounding area is designated as an environmental justice community by the state of Connecticut, which means it's in close proximity to a polluting facility, which could be an incinerator, a landfill, or et cetera, or that it has been historically. In this case, Yale School of Medicine, which is again across the street from the hospital, is listed as a significant cause of air pollution. And I'm very curious about that, and I haven't learned much yet, but it's on my list. So at this stage, my questions are expansive from the small scale as questions like, what are the physical materials of waste and their containers? I'm also interested in what are the pathways that waste travels. And along those lines, I'm thinking about what are the sorting logics. So what counts as waste and what doesn't, and who decides that, and what gets reused. So a tiny example, patient's blood drawn for a blood test is often reused for research. It's very difficult to figure out how to opt out of that, but that's something that becomes a reusable resource. And on a large scale, I'm interested in the economics and labor of waste management. And I'm interested in where these waste products end up. Are they incinerated, recycled, sold, and what their impact is on in terms of racial and environmental justice. You can go to the next slide, please. So the scope of what medical waste management is obviously overwhelming. So my starting point is to think about one area of the hospital and to trace the infrastructure and sorting logic of waste in that one area. I have a prior relationship with the autopsy service in New Haven Hospital, so I've decided to start there. This image is not from New Haven Hospital, it's from the Mayo Clinic, but it gives you kind of a feel of what an autopsy room looks like. So I'd love to think about how folks involved in the maintainers would approach this topic. I would especially love sources that can help me think across the typical boundaries that create a hard line between life and death. I'm interested in how this term waste gets used across the spectrum of living and non-living things, and how these materials change in value, economically and culturally over their lifespan. And I'd like to take seriously the relationality and materiality of everything present in this room. The specialized furniture, the plastic bin liners, the drains, the deceased human, the tools, the chemical preservatives for organs, the disinfectants, soaps, etc. You can go to the last slide. Thank you. So I have some questions here that basically summarize what I've been talking about, and I probably am over time, so I think I'll probably just leave it there. But thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Deborah. And I would love, or I can do it for you, putting those questions in the chat too, so people just remember them. And we can go back to them later. I am wondering if Matthew, if you are able to introduce the next presenter. Okay, maybe Matthew's dropped. Sometimes he has connection issues. So 1 second while I jump into Regina. I'm going to replace this. I'll add me. Okay. I'm very excited to introduce Regina Carra, archivist of the City University of New York. And she'll be describing how a survey of the City University of New York's archival records is being used to make an argument for more resources and staff to preserve the university's history. So I'll pass it to you, Regina. Thank you.
Yeah, hi everyone. Good morning from New York. Um, so for those that might not be familiar with what an archivist does, an archivist is someone who preserves and makes accessible records of historical value for research and learning and other creative purposes. And archivists are maintainers because we are often sustaining systems such as catalogs or metadata schemas or storage facilities full of ordered boxes. All for the purpose of caring for records and for the people who are shaped by records. And I've been thinking a lot about the importance of assessment and taking stock. And I've come to the conclusion that assessment is a strategic investment in maintenance because it prompts the gathering of information needed to formally convey the totality of our reality and hopefully create positive change. We've been doing a lot of this lately at the City University of New York, or CUNY, New York City's public university system. For years, archives at CUNY have been under-resourced, which has led to records being lost or inaccessible to the public because they haven't been kept or organized. Archivists have felt stretched, often working alone and responsible for multiple major programs within their libraries where they work, all while dealing with an increasing backlog of records that need to be processed. We now have concrete data to help us better understand this reality of CUNY archives and what it's going to take from a capacity standpoint to change course. For the past year and a half, I and 11 other project archivists have traveled to each CUNY archive, opened every box, and logged information about what we saw in a spreadsheet. This survey is part of a 3-year Cultivating Archives and Institutional Memory project funded by the Mellon Foundation and administered by CUNY's Office of Library Services. And this is a division of CUNY's Central Administrative Office, which supports all of the libraries on CUNY's 26 campuses, and they're pictured here on the map. The goal of this project is to tell the story of CUNY by empowering archivists with the resources needed to make their archives and this history more accessible. This project is unprecedented in CUNY's history. There has never been a project team like ours, situated at CUNY's central office, tasked with taking a broad look at the possibilities and needs of archives at CUNY. This survey is important because it is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to actually directly assess CUNY's archives and identify opportunities to support them better. Now that we have, for the most part, finished this work, here's a picture that is taking shape using our survey data. There are approximately 46,350 linear feet of archival records at CUNY. That's about 9 miles or 14 kilometers of archives contained in about 54,000 containers. About 37% of CUNY's archives are under-processed. That means that 17,000 linear feet has not been fully organized by an archivist and therefore are not ready to be handled or accessed safely, intelligently, or efficiently by the public. With these numbers on hand, I've been using total cost of stewardship tools. These are formulas developed by my field, by other archivists, to estimate how long it will take CUNY's existing archival staff to turn this unprocessed backlog into accessible archival collections. The results show that it will take approximately 25 to 36 years. In the coming months, I hope to refine this data-driven picture and let my administrative brain dream a little bit. What would it look like if we increased our staffing capacity? What are the potential avenues to make this happen? But most importantly, I think we need to return to the experiential thinking that prompted our survey assessment in the first place, now that we have this information on hand. What does it mean that it will take 25 to 36 years to process our collections? What are the consequences of this? And are these acceptable to us? particularly for a public institution like CUNY, which is devoted to using public funds for the public good? What do we hope for instead? I don't have all the answers to these questions, and they are not mine to answer alone. But I'll close with a reminder that our path to these important questions began with taking stock, one box at a time. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Regina. That was really incredible. So many boxes. I am going to see if Matthew now wants to introduce himself while he has connection.
Hi, I hope
Hi.
everyone can hear me. Well, thank you, Sam, for taking lead. I'm so sorry, I just got kicked out. Suddenly, my internet connection is somehow not good. My name is Matthew Lubari, and I'm currently connecting from Juba, South Sudan. I'm part of the maintenance steering committee member. I've been with the maintenance for a couple of years now. And my professional work is on advocacy related to the right to repair, especially my work revolves around teaching young people in the refugee settlement in Uganda repair and reuse of everyday items. And I'm so glad to see, a number of people today attending these lighting sessions and hearing also from the panelists today. Thank you so much. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Matthew. Hamani, do you want to introduce the next person?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Sam. Now I would like to introduce Miriam. Miriam Devlin is a general contractor and arts educator. And today they'll be sharing observations and research about shit fixes, which is a term I really love to hear in building repair. And as they've shared, like the description, colorful language will be used in this presentation. Thank you so much, Miriam.
Thank you. I'm going to begin sharing. I just want to note for you all that some slides do repeat. Don't worry, that is on purpose. It's just to give you an opportunity to see things again. And if you could all do me a favor, and I have a timer going automatically. If you do not see a railing when I start talking about a railing in about 20 seconds, stop me. It's not moving as it should. And I will get back to it. All right, here we go. This talk is a lightning aggregation. My research is from study of ethnography, history, and entrepreneurship during craft studies graduate school and a business design program, but largely my work as a fabricator and general contractor, and experiences in multi-generational community home maintenance, in particular in Philadelphia. I grew up with this railing and I live with it now. Now that the through-drilled carriage bolt has been installed, the railing is unlikely to drop someone, though there was a bigger fight about this fix than about the problem. I am thankful that the bolt was installed. I see it and am in admiration of the method, recognize realities of context that necessitated the work, and also feel regret. It's a shit fix, but it works. Once a building's repairs have resolved enough to be static and finished, for a while you have to know something about time and craft on a landscape to see that the work still has edges that are already coming apart, whereas some repair is glaringly obvious. Shit fixers make a practical commitment to diligence in the face of a possibility to maintain. They also demonstrate lack of action out of concern for visual cohesion. These fixes look like afterthoughts. To those in the know, they also look satisfying, engage active stances in service of practical concerns, and like the work of someone who cares enough to intervene and has capacity for working with those resources which are readily available. A shit fix motivates a feeling with the positive strength of greatness and the negative strength of terribleness, while being cheap and serviceable. The work is a repair, which is more of a maintaining than a real fixing and carries recognizable particularities. The work to make the left solution and the work to make the right solution are to an extent good for different reasons. At the same time, they look good to me for some of the same reasons. The water isn't getting in anymore. I like to look around my neighborhoods and think about what looks cheap or fucked up and what how that feels could be about. Here are more perspectives on a porch, worn through, then wrenched apart, then patched together. It seems to me that certain practices moored around keeping what's here and particular politics of place, among other such things that I have found in common in Philadelphia, and amongst practiced repairers, help someone to see shit fixes for more of what they are than ugly. Every hill is subsiding and washing away. On this hillside, someone had driven a vehicle up the path to mow the meadow, leaving deep tracks in the muddy slope. Someone scattered gravel into the tracks. The angular chunks ground into the mud provide purchase for climbing. Water concentrates, washing gravel and mud down the hillside, cutting the ruts ever deeper. Our feet sink when we stray from the gravel. The hill doesn't need a solution, but whoever wants to drive a tractor up the hill to mow may. Whatever solution is made to provide foot and vehicle passage up will erode, subside, and wash away. Then what will a solution be? Maintenance and then repairs are the steps between the creation of a solution, its collapse, and the creation of whatever comes next. The gravel that someone poured into the track is, in my vernacular, what I reference as a shit fix. In Philadelphia, other maybe shit fixes catch my eye on walks. A foamed-in window looks like, what a mess, or snidely, that was a choice. But I can see that some interventions have been made with care over time. Someone in a position to occasionally make small progress has been doing so. With every instance of time they spend, the work progresses towards more stability for the building and its inhabitants, maybe without an elegant finish. Many are able to feel the outcomes of the poor state of the economy of resources and attention in the look of our shabby surroundings, infrastructure which look the worse for wear, and like there's no one in sight to intervene. But there is a lot in sight. Vernacular patchwork repair constituting an everyday maintenance ecology that keeps homes and history livable through time. Participations in what architect Priya Jain describes as the patination of what I see as architectural landscape craft. Working as a building repairer in professional or domestic practice can give an understanding of the apparent ugliness of the hacked together as, thinking with cultural theorist Sylvia Wynter, part of a human animal's education into hegemonic perfectionism. Development of quick fixing skills can bring access to other forms of pleasantness, a view of careful handwork for human and non-human persistence amid environmental processes of wearing and degradation. Repairing adapts our skilled vision, per anthropologist Christina Grisseni. We can do repairs and better experience investments by prudent others. The doing, the capacity, and the shift in feeling all accomplish something sustaining. Design philosopher Yuriko Saito found that the look of beautiful wooden furnishings recalls the mass biodiversity wipeout of deforestation, the inverse of how bats look like rabies and Halloween, but also like cute, fundamental, desperately struggling members of our nourishing and constituent ecological contexts. Similarly, I find many a good fix to look also bad and a shit fix to look, conversely, then even better. I have many notes about lineage of scholarship and place, without time here to state sources, so briefly, here are some. The end.
Thank you so much, Miriam. So many wonderful shit fixes to look at. I'm going to pass it to Purna now to introduce our last presenter.
Hi, my name is Purna and I'm from India and I'm part of Repair Cafe Bengaluru. And also I'm a human resource professional from the corporate. I started in 2015 to work with communities and basically focusing on community repairing. And this is the part of my life, and that is how I have also got connected with maintainers. And I've joined them as a fellow, and I'm very happy to see everybody's presentation today. And I have the honor to represent Betty Rexrode, and she is a architect from New York and a teacher. Betty has a special focus of her architecture on arts as well as sustainability. She's going to share with us the history of Danish Cording and the process of repairs and weaving. So here's Betty for all of us. Thank you.
Good morning. Hold on. Okay, everybody has my screen here.
We do. Yep.
Yeah. Traditional fiber furnishings are part of a more sustainable, healthier, and beautiful environment. Today, I'm going to share with you how to take on a repair or replacement and hope to inspire you to set aside perhaps the crossword for textile repairs or weavings. The act of weaving is something that can be an entire building, furniture, or an object. Egyptians used pliable reeds and grasses for furniture as early as 3000 BC. Weaving spread through the Roman Empire and became common during the 17th century, using local materials like willow and foreign Asian rattan for its durability and intricate patterns. During and after World War II, when rattan and seagrass were scarce, Danish cording was developed. Literally, it's twisted paper. That's genius, right? Its construction is 3 plies. So first it's a craft paper that's twisted, and then the 3 twisted or laced together to form a cord. Hans Wagner and other designers embraced this material, with Danish cording then becoming an iconic furniture feature of Scandinavian design. Here, Wagner's CH25 chair and some typical weaving patterns common to Danish cording. Characteristics of Danish cording: it's incredibly strong. By twisting the paper into the 3 cords, it holds hundreds of pounds. Durability, it lasts for up to 60 years. The comfort of the weave, just the right amount of give and lets the air move. And the weaving patterns provide both the decorative textures, so you don't need to layer shit upon shit, and enough just to work with everything. I learned Danish cording to reconstruct these chairs handed down through our family. This is a 60-year-old Yugoslavian folding chair in the style of Hans Wagner that got a lot of use and gave me the confidence to do this since there was very little to lose. You can see that while they were a set of sorts, they're also constructed with different patterns, which makes it more interesting. The chair, 5/6 with a half hitch each side. The stool, 2/6 with wrapped side rails. In taking on repairs like this, the first thing you need to do is document. Lots of photos, making diagrams, count and create a diagram so you have a memory of the piece when it no longer exists, marking the wraps front and back, and the same for the side rails. Then, as you start to disassemble and your stomach gets a little bit tight, you take notes and more photographs. Through the process of the disassembly, you actually learn about the process of the weaving and how the weaving was achieved. You also find things like the hidden splices, the 3 on the bottom, that show how different lengths of the cording that comes in cords like this are created and hidden here between the rails. And then last, before you take anything on, you do a test to see whether you can pull this off. Then you're ready to create a warp. And if any of you have ever woven, it's the warp and the weave, and that's the whole story. Working from left to right, first you tuck the end under the front rail, and you start at the front because this is usually wider, and you start your wraps, which is secure the rail. Then as you create your hitches, you keep them loose because you have to be able to work either something like this or a smaller hank through them, working from front to back and back to front, tightening then as you finish each one of these processes, and continue to weave all the way across. As you do the warp, the front rail will be completely wrapped. The rear infill wrap you'll do separately. For the weft, which is the side to side in the diagram on the right, it's similar in terms of the wrapping and done in about 50-foot increments or whatever you're willing to pull through your weaving. This weaving completely wraps the rails, and the process of wrapping each of the rails resets your direction to move to the other. And the only trick is to maintain your tension, try to recreate what you thought you started with and make sure you can fit in all the wraps. And when you're done, you can put your feet up and think of the next project or go back to the crosswords. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Betty. Really inspiring. I want to repair a chair. So I am going to spotlight all of our speakers. Thank you, everyone, for such fascinating work and such variety. I think this is really nice to have you all together. I think I want to give just like 1 minute for everyone to kind of stretch and reflect on what we just heard, because there was 4, so it's a lot. We heard about medical waste. We heard about archiving. We heard about ship fixes and Danish Cording. So let's take 1 minute, maybe stretch, and then we'll come back. And if people have questions, please be ready. You can unmute and ask them for everyone. Or if you have comments too, that would be great. So I'll give you a minute.
Yeah, and if you feel like you would rather just type them out in the chat, we'll take them for you. Don't worry.
Totally. Thank you, Hamani. Okay. I know that was a very short break, but does anyone have an initial question or comment for the group? And also, each of you could ask each other questions as well.
Or even if you want to respond to the questions or comments that our presenters had today towards the end of their presentations, that's great too. If you want to add something to that, it's good.
I can start with a question. Just thinking about the 4 presentations we saw in documentation. Betty, you were talking about documenting before you start disassembling the chair. Regina, you are documenting what's in each box. I'm really curious to hear a little bit more about that. Miriam, you have a wide variety of fun photos to look at. And Deborah, I'm curious about your documentation in particular, or how you're planning to go about understanding. You made a list of different things that you were probably going to survey the room. But yeah, what does that look like for you as far as documentation goes? Is that like just through numbers or what? It's kind of a big general question. I guess for Deborah and Regina more, I'd love to hear more about your process.
Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting project, and for us, we kind of we're a project team, so we're only employed by CUNY for 3 years. We are coming in and kind of collaborating with all of these archivists that are kind of in this constellation of our university system, and who are, like, by the way, are doing fantastic work and have been fantastic colleagues to work with, and they are really the experts on their collections. Like I can't I wasn't able to really foreground that in our and those that kind of constituency in this talk, but they really know their collections, and we're just kind of guests in their space. So we had, in terms of like how we created the survey and what we were looking for, we had ideas on what we wanted to kind of learn across the board. Like how much is there? Um, and then what are kind of maybe some general preservation concerns across the board, big and small, like, is there mold in the collection? And then does that point to a bigger facilities issue? And yes, unfortunately. And then there are other kind of smaller things that can be tackled by an archivist on the ground. And then we also really worked collaboratively with the archivist too. We always had these kind of prep meetings before our big team kind of showed up. Like, is there something we can help you with while we open up every box on your campus? Like, have you lost a box that we can help you find? Because we've been really good at finding boxes. Or is there something that you're hoping to work on? Like, do you want to scan all the newspaper? Well, let's help you find all the newspaper, because like actually a common misconception is that an archivist knows what's in every box. It's not the case. We don't just spend all day just opening up every box and like understanding what's in every box, because there's a lot of them. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's been we've had ideas as a project team on what we want to try to find out, but it's been a collaborative process amongst a bunch of people, and can be what's been fun is trying to kind of tailor that to help each archivist with things that they are directly working on.
This is such a big project, Regina. I want an update. For documentation for the medical waste project, there's kind of like two ways I'm thinking about that. So one is that I'm also going to be looking at archival documents, so looking through some more boxes. But I'll probably use like, just a spreadsheet approach to understanding what kind of archives relate to the history of the autopsy service at Yale New Haven Hospital. But because this is such an overwhelming topic, I think I'll probably think about, like when you mentioned like surveying the room, Sam, I'll probably think about like one element and take a like life cycle approach to like what happens to that element. So just off the top of my head, thinking about like tissue or tumors that are taken from a patient during an autopsy, it'd be interesting to think about how that, the tools that are used to remove that tissue, the wax that it gets preserved in, where that sits on a shelf somewhere, what are kind of like the policies that surround that, and then like what eventually down the line, what kind of disposal materials are used, and where does that ultimately end up. And it'd be great if the archives sort of tell me more about like how those processes get developed, but we shall see. But thank you for the question.
I know Perna put several questions in the chat. Perna, do you want to ask one?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sam. My first question would be to Betty. How do you see Danish coding today within your culture? It was once a natural part of our everyday life, but now it seems to be re-emerging more as a design or a fashion statement, often linked to the ideas of sustainability and organic living. How do you think Danish coding can be popularized again, not just as a trend, but as a healthy and a meaningful practice for our bodies and daily use?
Yeah, thank you, Perna. I think there are a couple of things. I think collectively, the culture has started to become aware of how things are made. So, what is their carbon footprint? which is one thing. But the other, which I think matters more to people, is what is their physical environment? And when you think of common furnishings and how they are made and what that means in terms of the production, but also the use, how healthy does that make your environment, or what happens when there is a fire? I think that's when you get traction. I started Danish Cording because I find, the process of weaving and particularly utilitarian objects fascinating. It also happens that our family project, which is creating a net zero, is a house from 1884, and it's small. So making small furnishings and maintaining small furnishings matter. We don't have air conditioning, so airflow matters. And so I'd like to think that Danish cording, wicker, caning, all of those things become more interesting. They're also completely accessible. And I like to think, I'm also a gardener and fascinated by how people aren't interested in creating their own food or where things come from. But I think by sharing, by teaching, that hopefully it's not simply a trend of what people are picking, but people can figure out that with, a coil of paper, that you can either repair a chair, replace a chair, or when that you have chair framing from something else, that instead of reupholstering it, you can come up with a more interesting way to approach it.
Yeah, thank you, Betty, for that answer. I'll just quickly move to Regina. Regina, I have one question for you. What are the core skills that you require for archiving? Is there any scope to involve the members from the community in this process? Because it says, you have mentioned the time which requires one box at a time, you said. Community participation could make archiving more inclusive and beneficial, while also helping preserve shared knowledge and histories. This is all general quote. I don't know if it is relevant to your work, but if you have anything to say about it. Thank you.
No, it's a great question, and it is related to our work. There's a whole kind of subsection of our field that's really focused on engaging with communities and creating community archives. And that kind of that movement sort of come out of more of the idea that archives can exist outside of institutions, but institutions can play a role in providing some stability sometimes for different communities. In terms of core skills required for archiving, I think increasingly it's just, there's so many different kinds of skills that people can use, whether you're a techie person or you're a crafty person working directly with stuff, or you are kind of thinking more administratively. And I think it's kind of a big tent of really talented people in this field, which is one of the things I love. But I think it is increasingly thinking about people and kind of having a bit of an ethic, thinking about records from an ethical standpoint too, and who are the people that are represented in records, and then who are the people that might get value from these things that maybe don't realize that they're there, or might have some kind of perspective that can develop what the records that you have, or that the records that you could have, and really working with those folks. So there's like some social skills in there that I think are increasingly becoming important. For our community at CUNY, a lot of this has to do with students in our community, and faculty. So getting these materials into the classroom, and teaching with these things, and then including students in the work of archival work, whether it's like teaching skills, or just getting their perspective, like what are you doing on campus, and would what your, the club records that you're creating, would those come to the archive, or would you like to learn how to do it yourself? Maybe what you're doing is not appropriate to be in an institution, but something that you can just pass on amongst your group. So yeah, it's community participation, I think is one of those avenues that we're thinking about in terms of trying to solve this like bigger CUNY problem. But it's also just an issue we think about generally about how do we create more conclusive record broadly. I hope that answers your question, Perna.
Yeah. Thank you, Regina. So I'll move on to Deborah.
Perna,
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry, but I just know that we're getting short on time and I want to make sure that we get a question for Miriam.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, Miriam, if like I loved your analysis of all the shit fixes, and I'm curious, um, how do you see those opportunities as a contractor? Are you like, yeah, I would love for you to talk more about it, like whether you're accepting them, whether you use it as a learning opportunity, like um, how do you approach your work based off of all of your analysis?
I'm going to answer Deborah's question really quickly because I think it is actually relevant as an answer to Sam's question. Um, the question is, do shit fixes and cultural preservation ever collide? So in the sort of big research project that I did that culminated in me talking a lot about shit fixes while I was in graduate school, um, just strategic for a wide variety of reasons, but that's another discussion. Um, I ended up focusing in a certain way on how shit fixes are fundamentally preservation work, and that what I see as somebody with multi-generational relationships with certain locations and the buildings there, what I see is that those buildings which are shit fixed maintain parts that those buildings which are overhauled, renovated to architectural spec cannot. The parts on a neglected building are still there when they've been patched together, and real renovation work often means removing those parts. Um, by no means is that like my point when I talk about shit fixes, but I think it's a very important thing to just recognize that there's a huge amount of respect in approaching materials in this way that allows them to remain there. Um, to Sam's question, and this relates to, if you recall, one little slide with a Bob's Burger character, Teddy, who's a general contractor. I'm really interested in representations in media of the shittiness of the kind of work that I do, um, because I think that's really culturally accurate. And that isn't just in reference to people who do shitty work. It's just it's a cultural, it's a class position, right? It's racialized, it's all this kind of stuff. But when I see a big distinction in, I mean, it's just very relevant in my life. When I get paid to do work, I I must achieve a certain level of professionalism, right? And what does that mean to whom is very, very different. And I sort of started doing this kind of work, research work, while struggling with the reality that to make a living as a general contractor, as with many things, the game is find ever more valuable projects to work on. And that brings me farther and farther away from sort of my personal lived experience of cheap houses and generations of patching shit together. Um, and then when I work with people who are in the trades who don't come from those kinds of backgrounds, there are things they don't know about making stuff work, and about reusing materials. And I sort of um, the way that these two things mediate each other at this point in my working is that I find the lack of respect amongst the general populace as well as amongst certain sectors of the trades for cheap work to be frustrating, ill-conceived, misguided, you know. I just think a lot about what I can't do shitty work when I'm getting paid to do work. That's not how that works. And that's really complicated. But I allow it to inform my um my descriptions. It's really common to like talk shit about all kinds of ways of going about things and all kinds of materials. And I become ever more careful or interested in turning away from that and talking about things being good rather than things being bad. Does that make sense? And I think that works in different um, stratigraphies of the work, but domestic practice and professional practice and who's doing the work for whom. A lot of shit fixes are somebody like keeping a family asset and or their home together. And that's complicated in professional circles, but there's still a lot of people doing that work in professional circles, but it's also often somebody's uncle or something. Is that an answer? That
I'm very sad that we only have a minute left because I think we could have more time to actually dive deeper into this. But what I've done is I've put two things in the chat. One, we have a conversation with Andrew Russell, who co-wrote The Innovation Delusion, which Perna is hosting next week, January 15th, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. IST time. And then I also put a sheet where you can share your practice and what you're interested in. And this is just a way to get to know each other better if you want to like talk further. I can also send a follow-up of the information that's been put in the chat by our four lightning talk presenters as well. But I want to thank everyone so much for diving into this so quickly. We put out the call a while ago, or in December, and we got some great ideas. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And I meant to put maybe also in the chat a link to filling out if you want to give a lightning talk in the future. But now I've lost that link. Let me, if people can hold on, I'll share that again.
Don't worry, we can just put it on Instagram and YouTube as well, Sam.
Okay, perfect. There you go. Thank you everyone so much. I really appreciate it. Take care.
Everyone, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.